knowing rarely begins at the moment it becomes clear. What appears as a clean instant of understanding is only the final surface of a slow accumulation happening beneath awareness. Long before the mind recognizes anything, faint signals have already entered the background. These signals are not thoughts, they are soft impressions without form. They settle quietly into a field already filled with older residues left behind by previous experiences. These residues exert tiny influences. They do not command or direct, they simply pull new signals toward particular regions of the interior field. This movement is subtle. It does not feel like thinking, it feels like silence. But within that silence, the accumulation has already started. As each signal drifts, it begins to cluster with other signals that share a faint similarity. The similarity may be tonal, emotional, or conceptual. The clustering happens automatically. Once a cluster begins to form, it pulls in more material. The pull is gentle but persistent. Over time, the cluster thickens, it gains density, it gains weight, it gains shape. None of this is visible to awareness. Awareness only encounters the final structure, not the long interior path that built it. This is the core idea. Knowing is not created in an instant. It is constructed through gradual, continuous accumulation. The instant of clarity is simply when the structure becomes strong enough for awareness to detect. The mechanism behind this formation is quiet convergence. A faint signal enters the background. Older residues apply soft influence, shifting the signal into alignment with emerging structures. As more material arrives, these emerging structures strengthen. Eventually, the accumulated pattern crosses a threshold where awareness can interpret it. Awareness calls this moment knowing, but the formation has been underway for much longer. To make this easier to sense, imagine a simple progression. A faint signal enters the background unnoticed. Subtle residues in the field guide it toward developing clusters. Multiple signals join and strengthen these clusters. When the cluster becomes coherent enough, awareness meets it and experiences it as knowing. When understood this way, knowing becomes less of a sudden realization and more of an ongoing interior building process. Pause and consider how knowing usually feels. It tends to feel immediate. The mind believes that clarity forms the moment it is recognized. But immediacy is a surface illusion created by the threshold of awareness. Beneath that threshold, impressions, traces, and tendencies are constantly moving. They combine and recombine. Some dissolve, others strengthen. The background field is always active even when consciousness feels still. Recognizing this reshapes the experience of uncertainty. Uncertainty is not an empty space where nothing is forming. It is a space where the accumulation is not yet strong enough to be recognized. This understanding softens internal pressure. There is no need to force certainty. The interior field is already doing the subtle work required to construct it. The mind becomes more patient. It learns to sense the early movements that precede clarity. These movements appear as slight leanings, faint orientations, or small shifts in attention. They are not fully formed and cannot be articulated, but they reveal that something is gathering, something is taking shape beneath the surface. Paying attention to these early signs creates a quieter relationship with cognition. The mind becomes less reactive because it understands that knowing is always in motion even before it becomes visible. Instead of demanding immediate clarity, the mind begins to observe the slow accumulation already underway. This observation brings a sense of calm. Thought becomes less forceful and more receptive. The interior field becomes something to witness rather than control. Over time, the early stages of knowing become easier to detect. The mind starts noticing how certain impressions linger, how others return, how some coalesce more strongly than others. These subtle observations show that understanding is not created through sudden leaps but through gentle layering. The process becomes intuitive. Knowing no longer feels like a surprise. It feels like the visible completion of a long unfolding. This perspective deepens confidence in thinking. There is no rush. There is no strain. Clarity emerges naturally when the accumulation reaches the point where awareness can grasp it. Until then, the process continues quietly, weaving itself into coherence. Knowing is the final shape of a long interior accumulation. What early traces are already gathering beneath your next realization?